Okay, guys, it's Comic Boom here. I guess this might be a de facto episode of Comic Boomerang. My guest today, and we usually take turns hosting these things. My guest today is Dark Knight Nation.
Hey, man.
And say hello, Dark Knight.
What's going on, guys? Boom. Thanks for having me on. It's always good to kind of have these little swappy dinner parties, so to speak, every week.
That's right. And this week we are discussing comic book conventions and our adventures at various Comic Cons. Not that I've been to a lot. I've only been to ones in Calgary and Edmonton, but they've really grown in the last 10 years. They've become a cultural phenomenon. And I think those of us who are longtime comic collectors, we've sort of watched them grow from small little venues with a couple thousand to 100,000 plus. So it's always interesting to talk about comic conventions. Everyone has their own little adventures, and I got some stories I can tell, and I know that Dark Knight, you do as well. So, yeah. Well, first I'll ask you, Dark Knight. I mean, let's when was your first comic convention?
Well, I guess technically my first comic convention, if you can even call it a comic convention, was, Jesus, what am I, 21 now? So I was maybe 15, 16. So it was 5 or 6 years ago. So I live in Connecticut, and there's this convention in Hartford called Connecticon that is, I would say, largely a little bit more of like an anime and manga convention than it is comic books, but it does have some comic book stuff. That was kind of back in the day before I really got into American comics and that style of storytelling. I was a little bit more into like mainstream manga. But I really don't remember it being anything special besides the fact that I was like 15, 16, and that there was a rave every night near the place. So I was a pumped up little pubescent boy.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, that was really it. There wasn't anything special about that convention.
It's funny because for myself, my first comic convention, I think, was way back in 2005 in Calgary, and I went to various sort of like comic book. They weren't really comic book conventions before that. They were just comic book retailers getting together selling comic books. And then in 2005 in Calgary, I was at the first Comic-Con in Calgary in 2005, and there's like only history tells us that only 3,000 people showed up, and that I remember that's probably about right. And it's incredible to me that when I think from 2005, to start off at 3,000 people, and then by 2012, Calgary hosted the first ever in 2012. That's when they hit over 90,000 people, and that was when the entire cast of Star Trek: The Next Generation was in Calgary, and they unfortunately for them, despite their best efforts, it was kind of an organizational disaster. It was a logistical disaster, and a lot of people couldn't get in. The fire marshals came, closed certain areas down because things weren't to code. It was overcrowded. They grossly underestimated the number of people that would show up, and I remember thinking that I couldn't blame them because, nobody showed up. Like there was like maybe 50 or 60,000 the year before. So now all of a sudden they're getting 30,000 more people, 20,000 more in a day. And really it totally caught them by surprise. and 2012, for me, I always remember that seemed to be the year, in my experience, in Canada here, in southern Alberta, Canada, Calgary, Alberta specifically, that seemed to be the year where it really shifted in southern Alberta, where you really saw the cultural shift that these comic conventions weren't really about comic books anymore. Or at least what seemed to pull people out was the celebrity status of the stars that you had and the photo ops and everything else. And that's when you began to see the complaints by certain longtime collectors. Sometimes I complain about how they get a little bit crowded and away from comic books. But at the same time, I love dressing up. I was always dressing up like Indiana Jones or Green Lantern or Jonah Hex. And man, oh man, it's so much fun. And in those early years, dressing up as cosplay, those were some really, really good times. I mean, I consider those the glory years. Now, quite frankly, everybody does it with the cosplay. So it's not as special anymore because everybody and their dog does it. And most people who do it really don't know nothing about comic books. They really don't have a clue. They spend all year building their costumes, and they ignore the comic part of the Comic Con.
I mean, I have two. I guess I have a question and a comment. At what subscriber milestone do we need to see you in that Green Lantern costume again?
Oh, I can show you. I could probably share the screen here. I can. Well, I'm short. I'm only like 5 foot. I'm maybe 5'6", and if I'm on my tippy toes, I maybe hit 5'7", right? So, and of course, I got the all I had was the cheap buy costumes, Green Lantern one, and it actually went over very well because in the pictures I added special effects after the fact. So my rig was always glowing in the pictures.
That's dope.
Of them anyway. Most of the time though, I did dress like I got all the good, like the original paraphernalia for Indiana Jones, and I would either be battle ravaged Indiana Jones, and I made the wooden sword, and I had the gun, and I had some adventure stories to tell because the weapons policy, it's one of my pet peeves. Some years my weapons would be confiscated because even though they're plastic, it looked too real. Other times I could get into Comic-Con. It wasn't until recently, until last year, that I couldn't even bring in my Indiana Jones whip. They finally amended the weapons policy that I could bring an actual whip in as long as I had a tensor bandaged. So I got to tell you, you know, it's a whole new field. Like when you dress up for a Comic-Con, you really have to be careful and study the weapons policy of the con you're going to, because it can really ruin your day if you put all that effort into a costume and realize you can't even wear it into the con. It's a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've never really dressed up, but only because I feel like if I did it, I just want to go fucking hard. I'd really want to make it a bum ass costume. But I don't know. All the cons I've went to are fine with any like prop weapon as long as it's not metal. That's like the only thing I've ever unless it's like a lightsaber, but if it's like pointed and metal, then there's your issue. But in like regards to what you were saying about like all these people cosplaying, I think it's pretty freaking cool. Especially when you see the people that do it right, even though they're not always the biggest comic book fans or what have you. I'm still like in awe that people put in that much work and effort into making these crazy badass costumes, some of which look like they could be movie or television props. You know, I'm one of those people that used to really get offended about like everything. And now that, you know, I started doing stuff on the internet, whenever I see people in crazy cool cosplays, I don't really question it, to be honest with you, man. Like I see people like I've seen like at New York, there was a guy in like Hulkbuster armor and it looked so freaking legit. Like the thing was a solid 7 or 8 feet tall. It had some sort of like metallic finish, man. Like badass. And the fact that somebody, whether or not they're a huge comic book fan or not, put that level of like love and care into it, I mean, that's pretty freaking fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I got some pictures here. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you see some of the pictures?
Yeah, I can see some Indiana Rocky up in there.
Yeah, I can click on some of them here. Yeah, I don't think yeah, just a lot of fun. I mean, I love cosplay. Like I don't mind dressing up, but and there's all kinds of different I mean, the costumes are amazing. And, you know, as long as I have an orange tip on my gun, it's usually not a big problem. I usually don't get a lot of pushback for the costume. Sometimes as Jonah Hex, there's sometimes I see politics creeping into it. Some people take offense to the Confederacy. That's my wife, Coralie. She puts up with my crap. It's always good if you have a significant other who puts up with your crap at a Comic-Con. That's a really, really good thing. That's the woman you want to marry. That's all I got to say. But yeah, there's lots of stuff here. I mean, how can you not love this stuff that I'm showing? You know, cosplay is just so much fun, and people that aren't. I agree with you. I don't want to give the impression that I don't love dressing up and going to cosplay. There's always that fine line between You know, I don't want the comic to lose out to all the entertainment. That's the only thing.
No, I hear
So,
you. I think that's like my biggest issue with San Diego is, you know, a couple of years ago, if you had asked me what I wanted to do for my 21st birthday, I would have said go to San Diego Comic Con. And just, you know, from what I see online and from what I hear from other people, it's mostly Hollywood. It's mostly Hollywood. And as much as I can appreciate that nerd culture is becoming popular and it's being put on the big screen, if I go to a Comic Con, I'm mostly going for the comic books. And that's why for me, I make it a priority to go to New York every year for the last couple of years. To me, that's the biggest actual Comic Con. And, you know, with that being said, there's still some really cool Hollywood stuff, you know, like this year, I got to see the 5 minute like Aquaman trailer before it released. I got to see a new Titans trailer, this, that, and the other thing. I got to see a Hellboy trailer for the new movie with David Harbour.
yeah,
And they actually didn't drop that online later. And it's fantastic. And I love this Hollywood stuff.
that's awesome.
But I think the thing that San Diego is losing out is the Comic Con part. And so I can see where you're going with that for sure.
Yeah. If how are the lineups for a place like New York Comic Con for those movie previews?
It's pretty fucking cool. You know, so I'm not a super big Hellboy fan. I'm only partway into the first volume of Hellboy, but one of the guys that I went with is a big Hellboy fan. So we made it kind of a priority to go see that. But you see some pretty cool people. Denai Guerrera was there. She played Okoye in Black Panther. You get a lot of like old actors, you know, like Mark Hamill came last year. Jesus, I'm trying to remember all the people that came this year, Hollywood wise. Even, you know, I usually focus on comic book stuff. You know, it's a lot of like old school actors for like photo ops. You have a couple new people, a lot of really big people come in for panels. Like I was actually like maybe 10 feet away from Zachary Levi at one point. I was getting stuff signed by James Tynion and Alvaro Martinez. And like they're clearing the DC booth area, and we're like, what the fuck's going on? Like I'm in the middle of getting my stuff signed by these guys. And they cleared out their security everywhere, and there's Zach Levi and Jim Lee. Like you could, like the fact that you can see a celebrity and be within like 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, plus feet from each other. You know? And then, like I said, I went to that trailer, that Hellboy panel, and you know, a couple rows up from me was David Harbour, Sasha Lane, fucking Mignola. It's nuts. And a lot of the time, like, you don't even know people are coming. Like this year, for example, they didn't, like, it wasn't advertised online that Frank Miller was going to be there in Artist Alley, and he was on Sunday.
Right.
Like, I was within 5 feet of Frank Miller. That's nuts.
Yeah, that's awesome. That really is.
To be fair, that was like the second time though. Funny story. Last year I went to a panel that Frank Miller was in. It was like a DC masterclass with like him, Greg Capullo, Tony Daniel, John Romita Jr. And I feel like I'm missing one other person. And at the end of the panel, a bunch of people stormed the stage trying to get stuff signed by those guys because some of them rarely sign. And me, I was kind of half scared, half trying to like be too polite. I was like, well, like I don't want to take too much of their time. Like they got to feel bad when all these people come up to them and ask them to sign their books. And then like I waited too long and I pulled like Dark Knight Returns. I had actually just bought issue 2 and 3 at the convention that day. A little bit too late, but I at least got to shake Frank Miller's hand because Dan DiDio was like pulling him out of the fucking room. But I later realized, like, if they didn't want to sign the books, they wouldn't have been signing the books. So I should have just nutted up and ran over to Frank Miller. But you know, it's really cool to kind of listen to people like that. You know, this year, thanks to DC, I was fortunate enough to meet Jeff Johns. And to be 100% honest with you, man, my legs were like shaking when I met Jeff Johns. Like, I knew I was going to be excited to meet him. But that was such a surreal experience, you know, with how busy he is and how much is going on. You know, he was nice enough to sign a book for me, shake my hand, take a photo with me. You know, it really, really cool experience. And even though I don't get a lot of you know, time exposure to people like that, the fact that they're willing to take that little bit of time to show their fans that like they appreciate that we follow their work and we purchase their work is huge. So,
well, I think what a lot of people don't realize, and I get this quite a bit, is when I go to cons, you know, a lot of people when I say celebrity, they're assuming I mean movie star or some celebrity that they want a photo op with, and they're in the photo op section paying their $60 to $120 for a picture, and I'm in Artist Alley, you know, talking to some up and coming artist who you can still walk up to and talk to, and you know, and that's what I love about Comic Cons, is that you can literally see the people that, you know, they might not be famous now, but you know, 5 or 6 or 10 years from now, they're going to be the top names in the industry. I mean, I got stuff signed by, you know, by Williamson. I got stuff signed by Rucka, by Wade, all when they were much younger. Ethan Van Sciver. I mean, all these guys when they were, you know, Jim Zub. I mean, and Gene Ha. I'm just rattling off these names here. I did a whole pile. I mean, I got Cameron Stewart, Pierre Guerra, John Bolton, Amanda Connor, Jimmy Palmiotti, Paul Dini, Alberto Riaz, Joe Peccar, Brian Wood, Al Garza, Dale Berry, Francis Manipul. I got original art from him. I didn't even know it was him until I saw the signature. Kerry Nord, cool. who's going to be drawing Conan with Jason Aaron. I got tons of original art from Kerry Nord. Fiona Staples, Camilla Derrico, Dustin Nugent, Bruce Timm, Adam Hughes, David Finch, Gail Simone. I got all this stuff is incredible here, and I got the art. I always, and this is something I recommend if people go to a con, is always buy. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna take it off screen sharing here. Just bear with me here. I don't know if we're back. But if you buy the hardcover, every Comic Con you can buy, like at least in Calgary, they have a hardcover of all the art from all the artists. I don't know if they have that in New York or San Diego. I'm sure they do.
No, too many. Honestly, believe it or not, there's just too many freaking artists.
Because what I love about Calgary is that there's a hardcover of all the guest artists, and they usually ask them to draw a Western theme. And then what you do is you pay $35 for the hardcover, and then you can go down Artist Alley and they will sign and do the original art. So I go to each table and I ask them to draw them a sketch, and it's usually they do it for free. And this is the type of stuff over the years. Now this one's back in 2014, but these are artists that that, you know, they sign it, they sign the, you know, and they draw all kinds of stuff. In fact, I want to show you the one story I want to say. This one here is a cover by Chad Hardin. He's the artist for Harley Quinn, right? Now the thing is, I think I paid $100 for this, right? So I go back the next day, and I told him I wanted a waist shot up and with Harley holding a hammer, right? So I go to pick it up, and he says to me, he goes, "Oh my God," he goes, "You wanted the hammer, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, actually I did." And he goes, "Yeah," because I mean I was paying $100 for it. So he says, he goes, "Well, okay, how about this?" He goes, I'll charge you $60, and give me your art book, and I'll draw the hammer in the art book." So he only charged me $60 for this, and I'll show you the art book. He draws the. I'll give it. I gotta find it here just a moment. There it is. In the art book, he draws me the hammer that was supposed to go on here, and he says, "Here's your hammer." And he signs it as in the art book. So
that's funny.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, that's one thing about it's just another good story about Comic Cons is that usually the artists are always there. They're in good spirits. They usually leave the con early. Often they have a whole list of things they have to draw, so they stay up late just drawing sketches, shoulder sketches, head sketches for people that you can pick up over the course of the weekend. And then you go and you pick it up. So it's always better if you can stay for the full course of the con, and that way you can. I go early to a con on a Thursday because it goes Thursday to Sunday. I go Thursday. I go to the artists that I like. I place my order, and then I usually pick it up on the Saturday or Sunday, and they've had plenty of time to do it. And that's the I find that works really well, and that way I don't have to waste too much time for the rest of the con. I can focus on well, everything else.
No, I hear you. For New York, I hear 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just because I can't really swing. I'm a college kid, for those of you who haven't seen me on anything. So I can't really swing missing 2 days of class and 4 days of work. I can usually swing missing 1 day of class and then like 2 or 3 days of work. But yeah, I hear you, man. Like if I had the time, I'd be going Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because I always feel like I'm missing something, especially, this most recent year when it became, it was still 75% pleasure, but like 25% business. And it was like a lot of running around, So I really wish I had that extra day to just kind of get everything together. Like I almost actually missed a signing with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo because everything was so crazy. And I had gotten a ticket for their signing at their Artist Alley booth. And I had read their signing at the DC booth thinking it was their DC signing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go get in line early because even with the ticketed signing, lines get crazy. So I went at like 2:15 to their artist booth thinking, oh, it's at 3:00. I'm here with plenty of time. I go up there. The attendant's like, they're leaving now. Like, you better get your books out and get it signed. So that was like that was a surreal experience where I was like, man, I'm going Thursday next year. I better swing going Thursday.
Yeah, no, there's so much that happens at cons. It's kind of hard to sort of keep, you really have to go. I'm sure New York's the same way as Calgary. You can download an app, and I found that very helpful. It has their own app, and you can, that way you can get, your phone can let you know when you got to be at a certain booth, and so you don't miss this or don't miss that. I find it very helpful. It's also helpful at a con. I always take a backpack with me with my own water in it, with my own snacks, because it can get expensive. You want to avoid the lineups. You always want to have cash on you. You want to have it secure. I mean, it's basically, I always pretend I'm in a foreign country and I'm protecting my own when I'm at a con.
I hear you, man. Like cash is king, especially if you want to buy like original art or commissions or whatever. Like this year, I bought my first original comic book page, and I remember, I was like, oh, I should be okay. I thought I had the money. It was like $200 cash from Robson Roca, who has done Green Lanterns. He's done Teen Titans and a couple other things for DC. I think he's done some Superman. He's actually going to be on Kelly Sue DeConnick's Aquaman run. So you guys should be really excited for that. Really cool guy. So I start pulling out my cash, and I have $185. The thing was $200. I was like, and I understand asking an artist, I guess, to go down in price, but I try to avoid it when I can because I don't want it to sound demeaning, and I know artists can sometimes take offense to that. So I look at him, and I was just like, can you give me like 5 minutes? So like, mind you, like New York's huge. It's super, super crowded. It's in the, it's in New York. It's only to be expected. So I'm like sprinting through like this group of people trying to get to this ATM so I can pay fucking $5 to take my money out. And I'm a nerd. I love nerds, but man, they are not like spatially conscious of what they're doing. It's either that or they don't care. And they're all like in the middle of the walkway, stopping and looking at people's boots, like, or stopping inappropriately. And me, like, I'm over here, like, stiff arming everybody to try to get to them, and I get back there, and I like, point being, like, just making sure you have more cash than you think you need at conventions is a good way to go about it.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it can get pricey, and you gotta be careful, because you could easily drop $1,000 easily.
Oh my God.
You could easily do that. And I'll give you I want to tell you, Ethan, this is a sketch that Ethan Van Sciver did for me. And I got to tell you this story because it says a lot about Ethan. Now, Ethan Van Sciver, as for those, as you know, he's somewhat controversial because he's Comicsgate, and he's politically, and he's somewhat vocal about it. and he's a really great artist. Well, this was back in 2000. I don't know if you dated it, or 2008, as you can see on the bottom there. So I walk up to Ethan and I introduce myself. I say I'm a great fan of your work, and I said to him, I said, can you draw me a picture? And he goes, yeah. He goes, yeah. What do you want? And I'm sort of like, I'm a little bit maybe starstruck or whatever, or comic book starstruck, whatever you want to call it.
I get you, man. Happened to me before,
right?
100%.
And I'm just, and he's a very down to earth guy, but he's not afraid to be cocky, and you notice that on his channel, and I mean that in a good way. But he's very confident. But he said to me, he goes, what do you want me to draw? And I go, I'm not sure. What do you want to draw? And he sort of stops. He looks up at me and he sighs and he says, I can draw anything. And he said it with so much confidence. He goes, I can draw anything. He goes, dude, or he didn't say dude. He says, what do you want? And I said, Power Girl. He says, done. So he starts drawing this. Nice. I'm like, I don't know. I can't remember if this took him 20 minutes or whatever, but yeah, it was but and it was I think it was pricey. It was like I think he charged 120. So it was, and back then it was still,
I mean, back then, yeah. Now I think that's pretty common, you know. Like you can find an indie artist with solid talent, but not to that level charging about that now. But you know, say Van Sciver, his politics or what have you, but he's a solid artist. I'll definitely give him that. He's, you know, I actually unsubscribed from his YouTube channel because I was getting tired of it, but I will never take away the fact that the guy is a spectacular artist. He's incredibly talented.
Yeah. And I'll give you just a couple more sketches. This is from Cameron Stewart. Cameron Stewart in 2008. Cameron Stewart, when he started out, his primary influence was Darwin Cook. And you could see Darwin Cook's influence in his first sketch that he gave me in 2008. Because Cameron Stewart, he was also often a guest artist on Catwoman during Darwin Cook's run when Darwin Cook was the artist, right? Now, in 2011, 3 years later, when he started to develop his own unique style, this was his sketch. The eyes are different. It's a little bit, forms a little different, darker tones.
I actually really like the later one.
Yeah, no, very good. And just, you know, you can really see, I love the fact that, I'm not even sure if he charged. I can't remember if I even paid anything for these things. He's just a really nice guy, Cameron Stewart. He's a really nice guy. Just it's stuff like that when they keep coming back every year. I think if these guys are so happy that you go up to them, and if you're willing to pay them a little bit, and some of them are very humble. And let me tell you something about, you know, not to get all self-help on you, but you know, when people suffer from low self-esteem or low self-worth, a lot of artists suffer from that. You know, Ethan Van Sciver is an exception, but it's amazing to me when I go down Artist Alley, I get so many sketches every year from artists that are, they have no self-esteem, but they're so happy that somebody actually asks them for a photograph or a drawing. It's incredible. I can get whatever I want. That's how come I always take my blank variant comic books, you know, the blank covers with the, and I probably got like 50, 60 of them. I always buy a blank cover. I don't care what it is. And I'll take my suitcase down Artist Alley and I'll go up to an unknown and I'll say, how much? If he says 10, 20 bucks, I said, what's your favorite character? Chances are I got a blank for it, and I'll give them the blank, and they're so happy that they get to draw in a comic book. And then I have it. And then I take a picture of them with it, and yeah, and it's something that I think it's just nice to have.
No, that's actually a really cool idea. I like that a lot. You know, I think getting like those random head sketches or commissions or however are one of the best parts about Comic-Con, you know. Like Jason Fabok, he's lately been venturing out and doing, like, even though he's a DC exclusive artist, he's been doing some Marvel headshots and sketches and such, and man, are they freaking gorgeous to see, like, his take on these characters, because you know, it's very likely that we won't see him really get to tackle them for a long time. So I think those are always really interesting. And like you know, like you said, I think it's really cool if you were to find like a more not even an amateur, but a less well-known artist, and then they happen to get big, and you're like, wow, I met that guy before he blew up.
Well, let me tell
Like
you.
that's how I.
I'll show you. This here is this one. I don't know if you can see it well, but this is Dale Berry. He's a well-known artist for Western comics. This is an awesome. So this is an original. And then I got the there was another one here. I thought I had it. Damn. This is Alberto Ruiz. He's sort of he's a Spanish artist. I don't know if you can see that, but it's
Yeah.
It's gorgeous stuff. I mean, and the thing is, this is back in the day when you could buy this stuff. They have an auction at the end of the con. Sometimes these things I paid like $60 for that one and $70 for the other. This is the originals, and these guys are, good artists, and I know I could, I know it's not about. I do it because I love it, and I collect this stuff. But for example, Jim Zub. I mean, Jim Zub is Jim Zubovich. I mean, I got original art from Jim Zub. Now, Jim Zub's a writer now, but he's also an artist. He was an artist for a long time, and he was Jim Zubovich. And so I know back when he was Zubovich, I remember going to the con every year in Calgary, and here's this Zubovich guy, and here he is now writing Avengers or writing Champions, and it's quite the thing to go back, and then they recognize you, and to go back and they point and say, yeah, you're Jonah Hex, or you're indie one year, that they can actually recall who you were. So it's quite something.
That's awesome. That's a really cool story. Stuff like that is, and one of the things I like too is that most people kind of don't think highly of inkers, but you got to think like these guys before they were inkers, they were pencilers. They were doing purely their own visual art, and like for example, you go up to Scott Williams, and his Batman is identical to Jim Lee's. Why? Because he's been tracing Jim Lee's Batman for 20 some. But you see people totally independent. Like, let me show you something. So, Jonathan Glapion, right? He's Greg Capullo's inker,
right?
Check this out.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
It looks nothing like Greg Capullo.
But what character is that?
It's Scarecrow.
That's Scarecrow. Oh, without the
like I mean, my camera doesn't do it any justice because this webcam sucks. But like Scarecrow, like this, I love this thing. And then he also did this guy.
That's great. Yeah.
And then I got one more on the other side of this one because I double bagged it.
Yeah, I like Mr. Freeze.
But like this guy is an incredible artist, but because he's an inker, people don't really look at him the same way you would a Greg Capullo or a Jim Lee or who have you. But this is incredible. Like I love this artwork. When I've been talking to you about how like I'm building a studio. This is going to be like on the set. Like this is going to be in the camera every single night. You know why? Because I like this artwork over some of the huge prints I have from like David Finch and guys of that quality. And it's not to say that Dave Finch's art isn't amazing, because it is, but I love seeing like guys like that or inkers that don't really get a chance to do their own illustration illustration on the like that shit's awesome. I literally went to the con seeking that out over every other piece of artwork that's there. And New York Comic Con's huge. There's a lot of artwork out there.
Yeah, I know. I've never been to New York Comic Con. Honestly, I know New York is probably I don't know how many people go to New York Comic Con. It must be millions. How many?
I have no idea, to be honest with you. All I know is the Javits Center is packed, like wall to wall every year. If you want to There's a Starbucks in the Javits Center, for example, and I don't, do a lot of Starbucks, but like if you want to get in line for Starbucks, you're waiting a half hour. You're waiting a half hour in a line just to get Starbucks. It's crazy, man. Um, I
That's
don't
crazy.
remember. I don't remember how big, but like their main stage, I think can probably hold.
Well, I thought that I thought San Diego was like 3 million people over a weekend, and I thought New
Yeah,
York was competing with 3 million for some reason. Maybe I'm wrong on that though. But
supposedly this year, New York I think topped San Diego in like head count.
yeah, that wouldn't surprise me because I know that New York was arguably they were saying that maybe they should be considered the top now because when they outnumber San Diego, there was that controversy or some a friendly rivalry between the two now, I guess.
Well, that and like you think about it, like I was saying before, the reason I picked New York over San Diego isn't just because I'm on the East Coast. It's because it's actually a comic convention. Like you go to the main stage and you see big panels about comic books. There's still panels about comic books at San Diego, I imagine, but it's comic
Yeah.
books. You know what I mean? And I don't think I would ever want to go to San Diego because I would constantly be comparing it to New York. So I'm pretty satisfied with not having to pay for a plane ticket and stay somewhere, that I'm not familiar with just to go see movie trailers that are going to pop up on the internet in about 5 minutes after I get out of the room.
Yeah. I thought I'd share. This is me teaming up with the Hulk.
I like your abs.
Yeah, this is this is great. This is so much fun. I mean, the costume never really fit me, but man, it's. I mean, I don't know how people can not enjoy uh going to a con and dressing up because it's so much fun.
Oh, dude, it's nuts, man. Like I said, I'm waiting for the day when I can finally like dress up and just kill a cosplay. In New York, you get a lot of people that are like straight up professional cosplayers, and literally look like their costume was pulled out of a movie set or a TV set.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Some of these people in the group are just friends, but yeah, great. Good Lord.
Oh
Yeah, it
boy.
sort of reminded me how many, there's a lot of, like, I can understand why there's always that, they're always talking about women with, cosplay does not equal consent because, good Lord, some of the ladies are very, shall I say,
Racy. Yeah, no.
yes.
In New York this year, there were quite a few female cosplayers where there was very little to no coverage. So I can see why they have to preface that. And also, like, to be fair, like, if you're touching a woman without their consent, you're an asshole,
Oh, yeah.
Uh, just because they want. And it's funny, like one comment I will make is that some people kind of go out and say like they're asking for it. Especially in the case of a comic book convention, you bitch and moan when these characters, like when female characters are kind of like, or their physiques or their body types are kind of played down and they're not as burlesque or
Yeah.
endowed, but like they're just trying to partake in the culture that you love, and you're over here saying, oh, they're asking for it, so like they're not allowed to cosplay the characters that have been, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's a ridiculous concept, and I actually find it funny. I used to get kind of rubbed the wrong way when I'd see like guys gender bend and actually do like the full female costume, you know what I mean? Not like taking a Harley Quinn and making him like a Charlie Quinn.
Yeah.
But now I kind of realize like whether or not they're doing it because of some, sexual identification or concept of masculinity or femininity, some of them just do it for the satire, and I love it. I've really grown to love stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the things that really, what I find fascinating is I really like the idea, like with DC bombshells and with the what do you call it?
The superhero
Uh,
girls thing.
Well, the DC Bombshells and just where things that are, the styles almost started off as cosplay, and then a comic book came out about it almost.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the steampunk. Like the steampunk cosplay is incredible. I mean, I really like seeing what they come up with creatively for steampunk outfits, and I love the creativity shown in so many of the costumes. And you can definitely see why these people are, they're so passionate about it. And watching there's guys on YouTube, which I'm sure you've seen some of them, that they actually make they make a fairly good living creating costumes for people who you know, you could pay $2,000-3,000 for your Iron Man costume, and the thing's made out of plastic, or the thing's made out of foam, but you can't tell by looking at it. It looks like metal, but it's made out of foam. I mean,
the craftsmanship is insane.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Yeah, and yeah, there's I'm gonna tell a story here.
Go for it.
And it was 2000. I'm probably going to butcher the year here. I believe it was, oh man, I'd be going back 5 years. I think it's 2016, 2015, maybe. Calgary Comic Con. I was going to go up, but we decided to go up last minute, my wife and I, and we decide, and just lo and behold, we're looking at hotel rooms, and one of the top hotels in downtown Calgary near the Comic Con is the Fairview Hotel. And I thought it was a Hail Mary, and it's one of those, it's serendipity. You know, I think it was $200 for the night, and they had one room left, and I had this coupon, and goddamn, we got it for another $50 off. So we're staying at this top-notch hotel. I had no idea that every celebrity at the Calgary Comic Con is staying in the Fairview Hotel. All of them. And this was quite incredible. This even the entire cast, most of the cast of The Walking Dead was there. Linda Hamilton was there. A lot of B-movie actors were there. Young Indiana Jones was. I mean, all these actors were there, and it's so funny. So we're sitting there. So I get up in the morning and I put on my Indiana Jones outfit, and I'm, you know, I'm full regalia, and I go to the elevator, and we're on the 4th floor of the Fairview Hotel. And so I go, and I'm going to meet my wife in the lobby. So I push the elevator door. The elevator door opens, and literally it's like, you know, 2 members of the Walking Dead cast, Carol and the Oriental guy, what's his name? And then there was 2 other ones, and then there was this guy named John not John something, I forget what, but he was Arnold Schwarzenegger's stuntman. He was the first guy I saw, because I went to a showing with him. We talked about being a stuntman for Terminator, and anyways, this elevator was packed with celebrities, and the door opens and they all look at me, and I remember the one actress said, she goes, "Well, that's something you don't see every day," because I was holding my Indiana Jones whip and anything else. Anyways, it was a great scene. And so so I took the elevator down with them, and I thought it was hilarious. Anyways, really cool. I forgot something in the hotel, in my hotel room. I went back up, and then my wife's in the hotel room because we miscommunicated. So then we go to the elevator then. And the door opens, and there's this old guy in the elevator, and I never thought nothing of it. So I'm in my Indiana Jones outfit, and wife gets in, and I notice my wife keeps looking at this old guy, and I'm not paying much attention. Anyways, we get out of the elevator, and my wife says to me, "Do you know who that is?" I go, "What? Who? The old guy?" Yeah, she goes, "That's John Carpenter." I go, "What?" "The director. That's John." I look. And I go, and I never even realized, because he said I had a nice costume before I got out of the elevator, and I thought it was just some random stranger, but it wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, just after the Comic-Con. So now we're after the Comic-Con. We're back in the Fairview Hotel, and we go to the lounge for drinks. This is about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and we're relaxed, but we're kind of dressed up because we thought we'd do that. And literally, there were celebrities everywhere. I mean, it was everyone that was at the con was in the lounge, and I was just and we literally met Linda Hamilton. She talked a little bit about how it was doing for Terminator. She was very friendly. We saw. Actually, I probably can't even say some of the stuff I saw. I'll have to tell you later. But let's just say that some of these movie stars, they definitely have some interesting social lives. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say anything out of school, but let's just say that if there was a National Enquirer reporter in that, it would have made the National Enquirer. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
And it's one of those experiences where now if I'm I've never stayed at the Fairview since, but because I got friends and family I can stay with now. But man, that's if you ever have an opportunity to do it. Yeah, great story.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Wow. I look forward to hearing some screen. No, I mean, it's, one of the things too is like the random meetups. Like this year I was getting ready. So, for those of you that aren't aware of my channel, I did an interview with Robert Venditti at New York Comic Con through DC, and he's the writer he did Green Lantern for 5-6 years now. That he just wrapped up. He kind of took over after Jeff Johns, and now he's writing Hawkman. And I'm over in like the DC interview area, and I'm walking in there, and as I walk in, like I'm trying not to kind of get freaked out because it's like this small space, kind of like isolated, on like the side of the Javits Center, and here's freaking Jim Lee, Scott Snyder, Brian Michael Bendis, like all these guys, and I'm just like, who am I focusing on right now? Like I just went up to Jim Lee and I was like, I don't want to bother you. I just want to quickly say thank you so much for your contribution to comic books. I love your artwork. Like Jim Lee's tiny too. Like Jim Lee, I may be about 5'7", 5'8", and Jim Lee's like up to here on me.
Yeah, he's a small guy.
He's a little guy, but it's super, super nice. He's like, he just, looks up at me, smiles like, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate you reading my stuff. But those are always some super fun meetings, man. Like the whole thing with Zachary Levi, I'm literally in line to get signed, get some stuff signed by James Tynion and Alvaro Martinez, who were the creative team on Justice League Dark and did work on Detective Comics together. And just like they're clearing out the whole area, and there's freaking Zachary Levi and Jim Lee, and I'm just like, what? Like I'll have to show you. I have pictures on my phone, and I'm like 10 feet away from the guy. And as he's walking out, like there's this big, like freaking, group of security guards, and I, run up, like shake his hand. I was like, hey man, like I can't wait to see your movie. I really like what I've seen from the trailer so far. Really nice guy. But those are some pretty cool little encounters, especially when you go to the bigger cons where these people are just walking around. Like the first day, I shit you not, they let me in a little bit early because I had some press pass stuff from DC to go check some stuff out, and I walk through and it's just fucking Denny O'Neil walking past me. Like I see, this fragile older guy, bald, like circular glasses, and I'm like, I was like, I mean, like, and mind you, like guys like him aren't even really like solicited to really be there very much. And I just call out to him like mindlessly, and I was like, Mr. O'Neill, and he turns around, and I'm just like, holy shit, this is Denny O'Neill. Like, this is not. I just walk up to him, and I'm like shaking his hand with both my hands, like thank you so much for like everything you've done for comic books and for Batman, and I appreciate your work deeply. And he's just, I mean, he's kind of like, he's probably heard it multiple times before, but he's like, well, I appreciate that, thank you. And I was just like, I don't want to take up too much of your time. And then literally 5 minutes later, Sean Gordon Murphy walks past me. Yeah. Like, right, what other place can you be at besides maybe like the DC offices, where something like that happens? It's nuts. Those chance experiences and encounters are awesome, for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, if you're at a con, and if you're into comic books, which is, I would think that at some point you you should probably have some interest in comic books if you're at a Comic-Con, that just going down Artist Alley and seeing what is there, because it's always amazing to me to see who you'll run into, and the talent is just incredible. Some of the very talented people you meet that are there year after year, and they're just waiting for their big break. And you really get an appreciation for how hard they work and the sacrifices they make. And some of them, I have to say, I feel sorry for, because I wonder how they even survive. You know, I mean, I actually believe it's like, you know, how many. It's always like the starving artist. You know, they really do make their sacrifice, and it's really good to see some of them coming back, you know, years later, and then seeing how that they've been so successful. So
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really interesting to see stuff like that. And what was funny too this year at New York, like, you know, like Donny Cates is obviously getting really big. You know, Marvel's been giving him a lot of work. Venom's been incredibly popular. His Gone Country is amazing. And there was like nobody in his line. And I don't know if I told you this, but on Sunday I was like, okay, not a lot of people have been in his line. So I bought both you and me a copy of Venom #1, and I was going to go get it signed by him.
yeah.
And I go to the table, and it was like, Donnie had to leave early. Sorry, he missed you. And I'm like, I was so bummed, man. I was so bummed. Like, I'm sitting, and now I have 2 copies of Venom #1 over in my living room. But you know, I guess I'll get them signed sometime. But stuff like that is always fun. You know, and what's really cool is, you know, one of the things that I love about Comic-Con is that, like, sometimes you bother a creator enough and they remember you. You know, this was, I think, the third or fourth year that I've gone to New York and met Scott Snyder. The first time I went to New York, I saw him like 3 times. You know, the second time I saw him once. This year I saw him like 2 or 3 times. And I went, you know, I went to his panel with Greg Capullo where they talked a little bit about Last Night, their Black Label book coming out, amongst a number of other things. And Scott's remembered me, man, like since my first year. And then, you know, now that I have a Court of the Owls tattoo, he definitely remembers me. And, you know, at the end of their panel, I didn't really bring anything for him to sign, but I just went up to him and I talked to him and I was like, you know, I got kind of like sentimental, and I was like, you know, I really appreciate the I guess the thematics that you deal with in your writing, how you take these stories that are ultimately really big and grand and out of this world crazy, but you tie in some of these really human concepts and thematics that make these stories feel relatable and feel like something that we can connect to. And that's ultimately, as a fan, something that I look forward to in your work. And I was like, you know, even though I don't always know where you're going, you know, namely in Justice League right now, I will continue to support your books no matter what, because I know that not only are you, you know, of incredible talent, you're a great human being.
Yeah.
So whether or not I love it or 100% know where you're going with it, I will still continue to support you. He's just super down to earth, you know. He was like, I really appreciate something that not a lot of fans will do in a polite way. You know, he's like, I know that you've been following my work for a while because I remember you from these past couple cons, and you know, the fact that you have the dedication to get something that I created tattooed on your skin is, you know, shows. and you know, he's a really, really down to earth guy. Yeah,
Well, I do think that there's a lot of when you meet someone you respect and whose work you respect, it's always a little bit it's almost a little bit surreal, because they really are just ordinary people. I mean, there's just, and as a matter of fact, a lot of them, I mean, you know, a lot of them, they're just wearing jeans and a ragged t-shirt, and you know, if you blinked, you wouldn't even think that they're anybody necessarily, that they're there as a guest or what have you, and they're always so friendly. I have to say there's a huge disconnect, because right now as you know, we're in the midst of a comic book culture war, and whenever I hear all this stuff about SJWs versus comic skaters online, every time I've been to a con, I've never encountered anything that I could even describe as half-assed political, at least not at Calgary. I've never experienced that. Every creator I've ever met has been friendly, every cosplayer I've met has been generally friendly. Everyone is generally happy. Nobody is protesting anything. Or I mean, I hear stories about that about other cons, but I don't know. I've had very positive experience at Calgary Comic Con, but Dark Knight, I was curious about your experience in New York. Is there any? Do you find there to be any sort of political movements or politics at a New York Comic Con at all that you've experienced?
No, not at all. You know, largely these people, well, you have two or three types of people really at a Comic-Con. You have the fans, you know, like you or I, that are looking to just kind of embrace the culture and everything about it, meet some of the people that create and develop these stories and characters that we love. You have those assholes that walk around with like a dolly stacked with short boxes to get stuff signed and sell.
Yeah.
And then you have, you know, like the cosplayers and people who are not all cosplayers. Let me preface that. Some of the cosplayers I met earlier that just kind of like the costumes or the friends of the people like us that go to these things. And you know, I've never out of the 3 or 4 years I've been going to New York anything like that, you know, because ultimately most of the people are there to just celebrate the culture. You know, there's a lot to be celebrated, whether it be the storytelling or the humanity that you can find in characters or the big bombastic craziness that you can get out of a comic book that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And for discount prices, might I add, you know, it's a beautiful thing, you know, whether whether or not you're there just to see something big or crazy, or you're there because these fictional things have touched you at some point or another is big and powerful, you know. I've been in comic books or reading comic books. I've been a fan of comic books for probably, no, nothing crazy, but somewhere over half a decade now. And the
Yeah.
people whose books I buy are not only because they're great creators, but because they're great people and they treat their fans well. You know, getting to meet people like that ultimately makes things more rewarding. And when you look at it, or at least when I look at it, you know, when you buy these books, you are ultimately supporting someone's career. And I don't want to support someone's career if they're a scumbag. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's right.
It's like, you know, like I was saying about Scott Snyder. I don't, you know, I don't know where his Justice League run's going right now. Frankly, I don't.
Yeah.
There are things about it that are definitely redeeming. There are things about it that are not. But you know what?
I just gotta catch off. I gotta use the facilities. I'll be right back. Just keep talking.
No, it's all good. But you know, for those of you guys listening, the reason I love the guy is because, and I continue to read his work, is because one, I know he's talented, and I know that I'll get something out of the book, whether or not I 10 out of 10, you know, but also he understands that we're buying a product and that treating his fans right is one of the most important things to his job, because we're ultimately the people that are picking up his art and interpreting it in some way. You know, in particular, I actually just got my first couple of graded comic books, and ecstatic. But my first big book is my Batman #1 by Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, and the inker Jonathan Glapion. And I don't know if my shitty webcam can pick it up, but it's signed by all three of them. And for me, I wanted, you know, as sentimental and cheesy as it sounds, I really wanted the first book that I got graded and put up on a wall and sealed forever to be something that meant something to me. Whether or not I just loved the story or it had some deeper, more personal meaning to it. And this was exactly that. This was the book, or the story. The Court of Owls was the thing that really got me to nosedive into comics. You know, I'd kind of slowly been building up into becoming a real comic book fan. But when I got to the Court of Owls, I was like, I need to be buying this book every month. I need to know what's happening in this story. There's no stopping. I need to keep going and understanding. Not to mention, you know, some of the thematics that he deals with in the story. So for me, you know, for my Batman #1 to be a no-brainer, to be the first thing I've gotten, you know, sealed and graded, is something deeply personal to me. And amongst all the other things in the writing and the storytelling, Scott Snyder's a really great guy. Greg Capullo is a really great guy. Jonathan Glapian's a really great guy, you know? And it ultimately makes it more rewarding because not only do I love this book, I really, really, really like the people who were involved in making it. So getting to have that experience where you can meet and get to know, at least on some level, the people that are behind the stories that you love is awesome. It's one of the biggest things about going to a comic convention for me. So, and I imagine, Rocky, for you, that must be big, you know, getting to meet the people that create the things that you love.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just trying to find, I guess I gotta, guys. This guy here. But yeah, no, I don't know, I love Comic Cons because it's exactly the type of thing that I mean, it's basically, it's the to meet the, it's always, it's the heroes of my youth, you know. And you know how many, now in pop culture, we finally live in a day and age where we can actually meet the people that we admire. And growing up, I grew up, my medium was comic books. It wasn't video games. It still isn't video games. It's comic books. And to meet the people that create it, and to know how down to earth they are. And it's a little bit, sometimes it's not a good thing. I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes it shatters an image a little bit. You know, I'm not going to speak ill of anyone that anyone I had a negative opinion of. And I can't say any of it was really negative, but sometimes it's, let's just say that it pushes them off the altar, so to speak, sometimes.
Oh, for sure. You know, I mean, to be honest, I'm not really above doing that. I met Jay Lee at a Comic-Con a couple years ago, and, you know, I know, and I'm sure you know who Jay Lee is. He was kind of like one of the second generation of Image guys who went on to do some stuff with his artwork. But you know, one of the guys I was with, my buddy Doug, is a big Image guy because that was the height of his comic book reading when Image came out.
Yeah.
And, you know, he went to go see Jay Lee and he's saying hello. And like, Jay Lee's not like, he's not even looking up from his phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, there's that argument of whether or not like comic book artists or artists in general really owe their fans anything. And I will say that I think you at least owe some level of dignity and like respect, you know. I you know, they don't owe me, you know, applause, or they don't owe me some sort of gratification. All I want to know is like, or it's not even all I want to know. I'm here to tell you that I love your work and that I love what you do. And like, if you won't look up at the phone to fucking shake my hand or look me in the eye, you don't even have to say thank you for my comments. Just acknowledge that I'm a fan of your work, and that, you know, likely for some of these people, you spend $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, however many dollars a month to buy stuff with their name on it, you know? And that's the type of stuff that bothers me. And for me, like, I won't read anything the guy puts out anymore. I wasn't a huge fan of him beforehand, but something like that, just as much as Scott Snyder elevated his image in my head, Jay Lee kind of depressed his head.
Yeah, the two that there's two guys that I got to give shout outs to that I met. Well, the first one is, I've always been impressed with Gail Simone. Every time I met her twice at cons, and both times she's so easy to talk to. She answered a lot of my questions. We spoke at length. She was just a bundle of information, a lot of fun. She's quite funny. The other one is, and I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a B movie called Wolf Cop. I don't know if you guys ever watched a movie called Wolf Cop, but go on Netflix, type in Wolf Cop. It's a B-level movie, but the lead star, the guy who plays Wolf Cop, he was at the Calgary Comic-Con promoting the movie Wolf Cop. And and Wolf Cop, I didn't know this at the time. So I met this guy, and this was before he was in makeup. And then they go and they take him back, and they put him in the Wolf Cop makeup, and he literally he's dressed like a werewolf. And he's shaking hands, and you get to meet Wolf Cop. And one of the, I didn't know this at the time, but I figured, so the Wolf Cop, he comes up to me, he says, he's talking to me, and we're shooting the shit, and he goes, can I sign your art book? And I go, okay. I mean, I guess he's an artist. He's just not like an artist, but he's like an actor. So I guess
he's not a visual artist.
Right. So anyways, he signs my thing. And he signs it. He goes, give her shit, Rock. And then I think it's Leo Wolfcop Joe is his name. Anyways, the phrase give her shit, I didn't know what that was until I watched the movie. Wolf Cop always says give her shit. So it was, I don't know, it was just kind of funny. And he's so entertaining. He was entertaining everyone there, and just literally promoting a movie. And that's, I mean, you don't see that very often, where literally the guy, I mean, imagine the Avengers actually being in costume at a Comic-Con, dressed like the superheroes, and like, which they're not. They're always they're always Joe Cool. In fact, let's face it, one criticism I have of all the big, when all the Avengers, and when they do their Comic-Cons or their San Diego things, they're always, to me, they should be in costume, in my view. I mean, other than the Hulk, of course, you can't do it. But when they all look like grubs and they all look like they haven't shaved. Anyway,
so, you know what I mean? Like, so, no, it's cool. I feel like, a lot of the time, like, their hair is different, or like they are not shaved because, they haven't been shooting for a couple months or whatever. And, I mean, I can see the appeal of it for sure. But it doesn't really detract anything from me. Like when I went to the Hellboy panel, the fact that David Harbour wasn't in, a couple hours worth of makeup and prosthetics didn't really take it away from me, Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I have one of the things I also try to do when I'm at a con is I usually there's a bookstore. There's usually bookstores, and you can get used artist books. Like you can get, like, for example, Modern Masters. You can get old comic book magazines. It used to be back in the day, old issues of Comic Journal, when they talk with artists and inkers back in the day. They have you can pick up a lot of used and old comic book magazines that have displays like that just old artist book, like Modern Masters volume 1 through 5, 1 through 10, whatever. I love you can get so many hardcovers, and just the magnitude of books that are for sale. I think it's just, I love that portion of it. I like to have a full half day to just literally go and just shop comics, And I find that, I mean, I'm probably 3/4 done collecting all my Jonah Hex comics. And I always, when I'm dressed like Jonah Hex, looking for Jonah Hex comics, I always seem to get some pretty good deals. And so I quite enjoy that.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. No, I mean, I have this like Google Doc of all of my issues of pre-Flashpoint Batman and pre-Flashpoint Detective that I want to get every issue of. And this go hunting for it, because I knew that with, the studio coming up, I kind of wanted to get some artwork and other things. And I usually bring quite a few books to get signed. So my load is already pretty freaking heavy, if I do say so. So I haven't really been doing that in bulk, but I'll go, especially when I go to like smaller Comic-Cons, like at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. They've had this thing called Terrificon the last couple of years. And like last year, it was actually pretty good. They had a couple, it was no New York, but, and then this year they had a massive upgrade, but that's like the con where I really do my comic book shopping, just because I have way less to go get signed. And I just frankly have baggage space and shoulder strength, for that matter. But no, I mean, Comic-Con's awesome. There's so much you can do, because I think we've talked a great deal about the artists, but there are a lot of cool like specialty vendors that you find, like leather makers that will make you like your favorite superheroes, like a leather jacket modeled off of their costume. If you were to look at, for example, like the early Arrow costume, it literally looked like a leather jacket. You can find something like that, or Jason Todd's leather jacket in a comic books. It's like the fact that somebody like takes that amount of time and effort to hone their craft to do something like that is really cool. Like I found, I don't remember the name of the place, but whatever, we're not getting paid to sponsor anybody. It was this company that makes like these custom lightsabers, and they're like movie prop qualities. Like they use legitimate hard metal. They make like, they have a motion sensor, they make sound effects. Like they just look so good. I mean, they're thousands of dollars, but they look so good. And the fact that you can go to a Comic-Con and see that shit in person is really freaking cool. You know, it'll never top getting to meet artists and writers, but getting to see some of these vendors are awesome.
Well, a lot of them are definitely the leather. I got some leather garb. I got some with some different superhero symbols on it, like that I wear for some occasionally some of my reviews, but you can't see it because my hands are down. But yeah, like you said, there's just amazing stuff you can buy. It's pricey, but it's definitely, if you're into that kind of thing, it's definitely there. Especially if you're into steampunk. There's a lot of steampunk clothing that you can get for a song. Like there's a lot of creative stuff out there. One thing that I'm still looking to buy is Jonah Hex says he had a particular style of gun in his early Jonah Hex stories, and I can't remember the gun anymore because I'm not into guns, so I don't tend to remember. I don't tend to remember it, but it was an actual 6-shooter from 1858, what they would have actually looked like, and to actually buy it like with all the parts, but with incapacitated. Here in Canada, you can't, in order to be legal, the insides have to be, I don't know, reworked or something in order to make it a legal purchase. But just really gorgeous, like the weapons that you can buy, and that they make them, but not out of metal, but out of hard plastic, and the detail that goes into it, it's just absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, you can just find some stuff. One of the things too that I love is that you'll have like these art galleries that come in, like comic book art galleries. You'll get to see some crazy original art. Like last year I saw the original Neil Adams comic book cover of the first appearance of Man-Bat. Or you see I found like a restored Batman #1. Like this is history you get to see, and then just getting to see some of the stuff that you buy in print, like in real life, like that. How just the Justice League books have all had like these sequential Jim Lee covers of each of the Justice League members.
Say that again.
How the most current Justice League run has had like these Jim Lee covers sequentially of all the Justice League members.
Right.
That Batman cover of the pencils and inks, no coloring. Guess how much that goes for?
Oh man. I honestly, I'd be curious. I couldn't begin to guess. I don't know, $5,000.
$30,000.
What's that?
30 grand.
30.
That is a brand new luxury vehicle. It's nuts. Like it's insane. Like I'm trying to remember that we saw some. Oh, I think it was like Detective, like 47, something like that. It was it was like one of the Batman's earliest appearances within his like first year, and it was I think it was the cover. It was like $220,000. It's stuff I'll never. But like seeing some of this stuff in person is nuts. I got to see some authentic like Jack Kirby Captain America and some Jack Kirby Thor. I got to see some Steve Dillon Preacher. It's awesome. Obviously I'll never be able to afford that stuff, but seeing it in person is kind of surreal.
Yeah, that's stuff. That's another level of collecting, right? It's a lot of that stuff. The biggest collectors of those are the actual creators and writers themselves, because they have the inside track, and a lot of it's gifted to them, and a lot of it they just happen to have, and they've acquired it through their time. And I mean, because it gets really expensive. I mean, when you can buy the pages at every table, and they usually, at a minimum, you're paying $50 to $60 Canadian here, and it can go up. Well, sky's the limit, really. $50 to $60, upwards to $500 or $600 a page, depending on what it is. And even on, I noticed even online, I wanted to buy some of Joelle Jones' Catwoman art, and even her Lady Killer art, her original pages. And there, even that's upwards of 1,500 to 4,500 bucks for a page on some of the more popular pages. But you know that as she becomes more famous, those classic pages, you know, they're gonna only go up in price. So it's one of those things where if you have the money to, you know, if you it's I guess it's like the stock market, but I would say it's even more reliable than the stock market because you know, statistically, and just as a quick aside, when you invest in comic books, when the economy is down, people invest in comic books actually more. In comic book market, actually, the higher portions of the comic book market with original art, it actually goes up in value during lower economic times because you know, it's well known that the rich tend to invest more in the arts during when the economy is low.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. I'm kind of not surprised. I mean, it makes sense. You know, I had mentioned like Frank Miller having his own Artist Alley boot, and they had the original artwork for the cover to Dark Knight Returns #1, which is not for sale. Take a guess at what that cover was raised at. It'll blow your freaking mind.
For Dark Knight #1?
Dark Knight Returns #1 original cover.
200,000.
Go up.
300,000.
Up.
$500,000.
Times 3.
Really? 1.5?
$1.5 million for the Dark Knight Returns cover. But it's like, I was in the presence of $1.5 million. Like, that's not to mention one of the most iconic pieces of imagery in all of comic books. I mean, this is insane, you know?
That is insane. But that's incredible.
To be fair, though, if I had that kind of money, I think I would probably spend it mindlessly on a bunch of artwork, you know? There was a time where I was like looking into like Greg Capullo Batman. If you want to get a single page with Batman in it, like at all, like with like farther than the extent of like just maybe a shadow, you're paying upwards of 10 grand. And one of the things that makes me really think about this is, you know, there are a lot of quote unquote high art visual artists who will charge millions or hundreds of dollars for their artwork. And, you know, I think that because of like the social connotation behind comic books, people sometimes forget, and myself included, that like this stuff is just as much artwork as something like the Mona Lisa was or anything by Monet. It's just done in a different context. So yeah. As much as I wish some of this art were cheaper, I can kind of understand why it's so expensive.
Yeah. And in actual fact, I don't mean to put down Leonardo da Vinci. He was a genius, but if you look at a lot of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, I mean, I've probably looked at all of them, quite frankly, because I like Leonardo da Vinci, but I've seen comic book artists that I would put up against Leonardo da Vinci's sketches. I have. We all have. And, you know, really, if Leonardo da Vinci existed today, he'd probably, and it's easy to see him being a comic book artist. And so, yeah, I completely agree that, you know.
Yeah, besides the fact that he was an inventor, but I mean, that's, to be fair, like being an inventor in a comic book, you know, is not necessarily a visual artist, but somebody who works in comics isn't super far-fetched. I don't know if you know this, but William Moulton Marston, the creator of Wonder Woman, actually invented the first lie detector test. Did you know that?
I did know that, yeah. And if you want a good movie on that, I think it's called William Marston and the Wonder Woman. It stars. It tells his story. He actually had 2 wives. He had a wife and a mistress, and he was actually into bondage, and that's why he entered into Wonder Woman. He was actually into that type of sexual bondage in his own open marriage. It was him and 2 women that were together.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I mean, a lot of people don't have access to super early Wonder Woman stuff. But if you read Grant Morrison's Earth 1 Wonder Woman, that's why he calls back to a lot of the, you know, Wonder Woman in captivity or breaking free of chains. It's early implications of the feminist movement. Even though some of it with Marston's case was, I don't want to say masochistic, but oftentimes like Wonder Woman would get spanked by her villains in the Golden Age. But yeah, I mean, Marston was a kinky guy.
He was into that. He was literally into that loving submission. He believed very strongly in that even in his writings. I mean, he was really into that. If you really get into Wonder Woman, I did back in the day when I was an academic long before I went into law school, but suffice to say, I did one of my thesis I did was on crime comics, and it was that Wonder Woman leading into the crime comic legislation from a Canadian perspective. And anyways, I won't bore you with the details, but it's very interesting when you get into the early comic book histories and what they could get away with so much more before the Comics Code Authority. Comic books were way better than they were from the mid-1930s to the early 1948 when the cadaver hearings and the seduction of the innocent books came out and the Comics Code came in. Comic books were much more avant-garde. They really pushed the envelope. And there was after the Comics Code came in, there was basically a nosedive in the quality of stories when you compare the two. It's actually quite sad when you think about it, but it is what it is.
It's part of comic book culture. Without that, I don't think we would have gotten the 66th Adam West TV show. And then, without that, Batman comics wouldn't have continued to get published. So a lot of that has, I think, historical significance. And I don't think the comic book industry, I would even venture to say wholeheartedly that the comic book industry wouldn't be the same without things like that. Without it, the Green Lantern, Green Arrow crossover with the issue with the cover, my ward is a junkie, wouldn't have become a cultural icon. And I don't think that story would have either, because it was diverging from, the common social standard. And that's why The Dark Knight Returns was so big, because, for many people, when The Dark Knight Returns came out, their Batman was Adam West. Their Batman was campy and going on these like slapstick adventures with the boy Wonder in tights. And that was when the reality kind of set in. For as fictional as these things are, like, stories became very much things that could happen in some shape in the real world. It was a contemporary United States, for example, in The Dark Knight Returns during the Cold War. And there was it kind of capitalized on fear of the Red Scare and a number of other things. So that's
a lot of it too was that the Denny O'Neil Batman of the 1970s and his particular style, and his Batman was kind of a nice guy. He was a escape artist, but he never really had a great deal of darkness in him. That came with Frank Miller. Frank Miller, redefined the Dark Knight for an entire generation, that it still stayed with us, and it made him darker. Everybody copied his interpretation of Batman now, and it's an interpretation that still hasn't really gone away. I mean, when you think about it, one of the reasons why Tom King's Batman seems to be so popular with so many people is because it's actually entertaining. The entire theme of Tom King's Batman is, can Batman be happy and still be Batman? I mean, that's how ingrained the Frank Miller version of Batman is that it's almost inconceivable that Batman can be happy and still be effective.
No, and going back to Frank Miller, I think, well, I don't, you can ask a number of comic book writers and artists in the game today, and you ask them the top 5 comic books that inspired to do what they do today. I can guarantee you nearly every single one of them will say The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. And I think that even though largely you look at Frank Miller's work in comic books and it's very 50-50, it's either really good or really not, his work was so good that people largely kind of, I don't want to say forget, but they don't consider his bad work. You know what I mean? He's looked at as an icon and as a legend and as a master of his craft, even though he's kind of, if you look at book for book, he's kind of batting like 50 right now. But, you know, you ask somebody who the most influential writer in comic books is, they're likely either going to say Grant Morrison, maybe even Grant Morrison, but likely Alan Moore or Frank Miller. That's all there is to it. You know, the stuff that he was doing was so ahead of its time and so revolutionary. It struck a chord with not only American pop culture, but global pop culture.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, he's also one of the, probably the first, he's a real genuine celebrity. And it's really great to see these guys get the recognition that they deserve, even if it is a little late. One thing I wanted to show is, I think I showed this before, but I did get Stan Lee. I got my picture taken with Stan Lee finally. This is before he well, this is before his dementia or whatever he's got. But yeah. I managed to wear my this is a special picture of me because the first time I went to a con, I was dressed as Indiana Jones. And so I went as Indiana Jones, and I managed to buy a cheap Spider-Man shirt that said 1962 on it beside Spider-Man's head. And Stan Lee was really good. I don't know if you've ever been to a photo op before, but at a photo op, you basically have, and I've timed it, you basically have 4 seconds to get in. I mean, they herd you like cattle. You're in, you're out. You have enough time to say, shake his hand, hello, hello, hi, hi, flip around. They snap the picture. They escort you out. It happens really, really quick. You don't have a lot of time to talk to the person you're having your picture taken with at all. And so, so you gotta, you know, practice in a mirror to flip real quick and smile. So after how many takes, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things I've always found to be a bummer about the photo ops is like, you're mostly doing it so that you can meet these people and interact with them, you know, even though, you know, you to a degree, you come to the understanding that they're busy people. Even when, you know, like I said, I got to interview Rob Venditti at New York, and man, like the scheduling with them, you know, it's nothing negative. I understand that, you know, it's a busy time, but like they got me like in and out, you know. So let me tell a quick story. So at the con this year, you know, I go back to that area. I get a little bit starstruck. I shake Jim Lee's hand, and you know, there's Scott Snyder, Brian Bendis, and who have you. And one of the DC publicists was like, "Oh, the person canceled before you. Do you want to go early?" And here's me thinking, "Oh, awesome! I'm gonna get like an extra 10 minutes to like set up and do what I got to do, and maybe get a little bit more time." Nope. So I get into this area. I'm like struggling, like I'm. You know, he's like, okay, like we got to get going. Like, and I'm like pushing it to turn on my computer, set up my microphone. Like I originally brought 2 microphones to make sure everything ran fluidly. But I was like, okay, I only have time to plug in one and check it and set it up. The interview maybe lasted 7 minutes because, so he was like, I'll give you like a 2-minute warning and then like a closing warning. And I'm going and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get my warnings for time. So I'm in the middle of it. One of the publicists just like taps me on the shoulder. He's like, start wrapping up. And I'm like in the middle of asking Venditti about his Hawkman run and telling him how much I appreciate him. And I'm like, I'm trying to think in my head. I was like, how do I transition this into like closing statements? But, yeah, I was so convinced. I was like, oh, I got like an extra couple minutes. Like I can set up and then like, you know, go through the proceedings in a decent amount of time. But man, it's very chop. And that's not to be said anything. I guess it's, you know, mostly it's my own ignorance. You know, I wasn't really aware of how that type of thing is being run and how much of an oiled machine this whole thing is. But man, like it was very chop. Like I kind of had to like move over into another area so I could go pack up all my audio equipment and my laptop because like it was just go. And it was a wonderful experience and I'm so grateful that I got to do it. And hopefully if there's a next time, I'll be a little bit more prepared for it. But
Yeah,
that was nuts. Just
I
kind of
find
going
that
through that.
when you always got to, especially when you're lining up for photographs or autographs, it's for I generally find that for first time people that do it, it's not a particularly positive experience all the time, because it often leads to disappointment because you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of time to talk, and it's expensive. I mean, I'm I'm fairly positive because I've been there from the beginning, so I know the realities of it. So I know what to expect, and I think it's a question of balancing your expectations. I often go to Comic Cons. I'm very familiar with taking people who've never been to one before, so I always make sure I make sure I manage their expectations as best I can, because if they're thinking that they're going to meet the celebrity and they're going to have 4 hours to talk, well, they're in for a big surprise. If they think that the celebrity is going to come back behind the autograph booth and let you take a selfie with them, I mean, they might, but you can't expect that. Sometimes they'll do it, sometimes they won't. But it's one of those things. I want another story I got to tell. I can't remember the name of this actress. She plays the Wicked Queen on Once Upon a Time.
Mm-hmm.
If you recognize her, if you ever watched Once Upon a Time.
I watched like some of the first season. It was pretty good.
Yeah, well, anyway, she plays the Wicked Witch, right? And she's the one that with the apple, she has Snow White that ate the apple. She plays the Wicked Witch. And anyways, I was getting a friend of mine wanted this. Well, actually, that's not true. I think I even wanted this autograph. Anyways, I just thought I always liked her as an actress. She seems kind of, she seems kind of hot, and she is. And so, she's holding up an apple, and I won't read to you what it says. I'll tell you what I wanted her to write. She goes, "Well, what do you want me to write?" And I said, so you get to pick which photograph they sign. And so I picked this photograph, and I told her, I said, "I want you to write, hey, Rocky, what do you think of my apples?"
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, she goes, "Well," she goes, "I just got engaged." She goes, "I just don't feel comfortable writing that
Mm-hmm.
And so instead she goes, "Rocky, thank you for putting a smile on my face." And then she signed it. I can't remember. I can't read her autograph, but there's that one there that I like. And the other one I had to get, and this is from the 80s because I grew up in the 80s. I finally got the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The original
That's
Buffy.
cool.
I got that signed by her. And I also got one signed by Carl Drago himself, Jason Momoa. Unfortunately, he wasn't allowed to sign any Aquaman photographs because at that time, Justice League hadn't come out yet, and DC, for contractual reasons, wouldn't let him sell his photographs with him in the Aquaman uniform. So, yeah, I got other ones, but those are some stories, anyways.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I mean, I thought that when we were trying to come up with a topic for this week, that Comic-Con stories would certainly be a fun one because it's just stuff that you would kind of never expect to hear. Like, I guess I'll divulge into a little bit of story time. I had mentioned that I went to a panel. It was a small panel, like at the end of, I want to say Friday night. I'm sorry. And it was Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Jock kind of made a surprise appearance, and they were mostly talking like last night in their career, and it was a big kind of Q&A. And so one of the first guys to go up, he stands up and like they pick on him and ask a question. And there's this random guy in like a baseball hat, t-shirt, and jeans. And I was just like, oh, okay, it's probably just some random guy that they passed the mic on to. He hands it over to this dude after asking the question. He looks at him and he goes, "Holy shit, Todd McFarlane just handed me a microphone." And everybody turns over, and the guy in the cap and jeans and shit is fucking Todd McFarlane. It's just in the middle of the Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo panel. And for those of you listening who don't know, Capullo and McFarlane was because Capullo's big break in comics was doing Spawn for McFarlane. And like people are kind of paying attention to him and stuff like that. But it's like, I had no idea like I looked at him and I was just like, oh, it's just some random guy. The Todd McFarlane was just right there and nobody knew about it. Like that's kind of nuts. I thought that was really funny. And he's like, it's funny because the whole time they're doing this panel, it's fucking like Todd McFarlane running around the room passing people the microphone, myself included. Like Todd just kind of goes up to me and I just kind of look at him, and the whole time, like when Scott and Greg and Jock were talking, kind of tries to go into a corner so nobody like pays attention to him. But I just like look at him and I'm like he hands me the mic and I'm just like, oh wait, I have a question to ask. And then I proceed to ask my question to Scott, Greg, and Jock and be a big, cornball. But man, stuff like that I find absolutely hilarious. Like you never know what you're going to see at a comic convention. I mean, it's always a really, really good time. Fun thing too, like outside the convention, it was Friday night. No, Friday night. Was it Friday night? It was Thursday or Friday night. And me and my group of friends were kind of like going back from dinner, walking around Midtown. And I don't know if you listen to this guy's music. He's a current like pop star. We see a big black like Escalade, kind of like stretch size. There's a couple bodyguards. And walking out of this building somewhere in Midtown is The Weeknd. Do you know who that is?
The Weeknd? I don't think so, no.
He's like a really big pop star amongst, like a younger demographic right now, but like he's huge. Like he did Starboy, and he's kind of well known for kind of, I guess, impersonating some Michael Jackson tunes, but he's huge. And he gets into the Escalade, and I look over at my friend and I'm like, did he look familiar to you? And he's like, I mean, no, why? I was like, I'm almost entirely sure that's The Weeknd. Like, you look him up, it's Weeknd, but there's no E in the end part. He's huge. He's really, really like popular worldwide. And I'm just like, holy shit. I just like, what are the chances that walking around Manhattan, like 8 million people live in Manhattan, that The Weeknd's right there? Stuff like that, in New York City. Like I've known people to walk around and meet like James Franco or, a number of other people, but at Comic-Cons, we meet our equivalent of these celebrities, the writers and the artists and such. So that's always really cool. For me this year, it was really nice because I got to, see Jason Fabok after doing an interview with him. And he actually was kind enough to give me a free print and sign it for me. That's nice. So that was really, really nice. So I'm really cool. So shout out to Jason. And, I got to see Tomasi again, who I've interviewed. And for those of you that have been like, that are watching, have been asking me about the interview, it will be up soon. I promise. It's still being worked on. But,
one of the things I'd recommend people do if you ever have an opportunity, and I did it for the first time this year at Calgary Comic Con. One of my friends was coming up with me, and he was recently exploring the single life, so to speak, and because normally I'd never go to an after party, but Calgary always has a cosplay after party, which is late at night on a Friday or Saturday after the con. And it was actually at Cowboys nightclub in Calgary, and I'd never been to one before. And we didn't know what to expect, but just in case, I thought I told my buddy, I said, let's go in costume. Well, he was a little reluctant, and I admit I was too, because I wasn't sure if everyone was going to dress up. We didn't want to be the only ones, but it's called Cowboys nightclub. And of course, we got cowboy boots and everything else. So we're decked out as cowboys to begin with. And of course, I got my Jonah Hex costume. And I also have my Iron Man full body costume, right? So we go to Cowboys nightclub, and we walk in, and the entire nightclub looks like the inside of Avengers Mansion. I mean, it was gorgeous. And there was like Avengers posters, all from the Avengers movie, like hanging from the walls. I mean, this nightclub looked like it was a superhero theme. I mean, it was really awesome. And
that's cool.
And lots of people dressed up, but pretty much all the women were dressed up. And so I walked in. Within 5 minutes, I'm saying to my buddy, hey, I'm going back to the truck. I said, I'm putting my outfit on. I said, I can't go wrong with this. So, but I can't talk him into it. I said, you got to do this, but he won't. So I said, well, okay, well, fine. Well, I'm going to do that. So I go back to my truck. And so I put on, now I'd never done this before. I put on, you know, the sort of like the cheap Iron Man Halloween things with the puffed up chest with the arc light, you know. So I put the Iron Man suit on first, and then I put my Jonah Hex suit on, which you kind of saw pictures of earlier. And you can, the way that my vest came up with the chest puffing out, the arc light puffed out. So I had the Jonah Hex cowboy hat on, and I had the Iron Man gloves and everything. And I got to say, it looked really good. And I got the cowboy boots on top of the Iron Man pants. My God, it went over very well. I went back in, and I was one of the, I'm telling you, I don't know, like guys, if anybody in their right skull, I mean, I was not a single guy, and but let's just say that if I was single, I could have probably had a lot more fun. But let me just say that it's a lot of fun. If you ever have an opportunity to go to an after party at a Comic-Con, you're absolutely a fool not to, especially if you're single. That's all I got to say.
As your kid screams in the background.
Oh, I behaved. You know, although it is it's always better to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. But I actually got permission to go first, if you can believe that. So I'm no dummy. I know what I'm doing.
No, I feel you, man. Talking about that too kind of inspires me, man. One of these days, we should have like an episode of Let's Talk Comics or Comic Boomerang if it's on your channel, and just like chat drunk comics, just like have a couple drinks and just have like these random topics on the board to go over, and we'll give ourselves like 5 to 10 minutes per topic, just talk about them drunk and see how that goes. I feel like that'd be a good time.
Yeah, it's funny. There's one of the little more risque. I'll watch how I'll say this, but there's a part in the Calgary Comic Con where there's I'll almost call them like they're women that dress like cosplay, but they're very risque. They're kind of like borderline X-rated, and you can get pictures taken with them that are very risque, and they've got their own website that is a little bit more probably, shall we say, X-rated, but they have a booth set up at the Calgary Comic-Con, and you can get your picture taken with them with you're in costume, and they're definitely a lot more provocative. You know how we say cosplay does not equal consent? Well, sometimes consent is implied, so to speak. And with some of these things, so you can pay to have your picture taken with them. And yeah, I think it's a whole new, I think there's I know there's a darker side to Comic-Cons, a little bit more of a riskier side. And it's something that I don't think probably a lot of people talk about, because nowadays everybody's so politically correct and nobody wants to go there because you're always going to offend somebody, and there's snowflakes and everything else. And but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of fun to be had at a Comic-Con that I know that nobody openly talks about. But that's a topic for another day.
It'll be called Comic Boom After Dark.
That's right. Comic Boom after Justice League Dark. How's that?
Oh boy. Look at us. We are marketing geniuses.
Yeah. We might have to leave out the Justice League part. We don't want to get sued for copyright or some damn thing.
You know, to be honest, fun side story. I was so afraid of naming my YouTube channel Dark Knight Nation because I thought that Warner Brothers would go after me for like the Dark Knight copyright.
Yeah.
I'm still a little bit afraid, but no, there is no buts. I'm still a little bit afraid. But
if you get, you can guarantee that if you get too popular, they might send you a notice. But
well, I'm at a point. I guess let's just say I'm glad enough that I have more subscribers than I can count on two hands. So I'll take it.
Yeah, but all right. Well, I think it's coming near the end here, so I think we should maybe wrap things up. I'm going to suggest, Dark Knight, that why don't we wrap things up by talking about our pulls for the week? I know we usually do that at the beginning, so why don't we just end? And so why don't you? We'll end. Dark Knight, we'll start with you. What's your pull of the week?
Well, I haven't read anything yet this week because I just finished putting out a video earlier today. But I'm most excited for Hawkman #5. That book has been so consistently good since it started. I went into it not really being a Hawkman. I'm a few issues in, and I feel like a Hawkman fan. I
Yeah.
like the character. I like the story and the mythos behind him that before this book I largely thought was incredibly confusing. So for those of you that aren't reading Hawkman and are aware of his incredibly convoluted past, this book to jump onto. Robert Venditti, plug, who I interviewed, um, is doing such a great job at managing the things that old time fans of the character love, and making it something that is more accessible to people like me, or to whatever people in question that I'm talking to.
I, I
Not to
would
mention,
add, I would
no,
add
go for
a
it.
quick add to Brian Hitch. I'll just
I
say,
would.
keep on talking. I just wanted to give a shout out to Brian Hitch, the artist on Hawkman. He's done a really good job too.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that next. Brian Hitch's art is top notch. Like I think he's doing some of the best stuff of his career. The art is so good, and the way that it interacts with the script and the more literal storytelling is incredible. The book's amazing, and just saying, this week it got one of those foil covers, and they look awesome. Let me give that little shout out. These DC foil covers look so good, and I can really appreciate that DC didn't upcharge for the foil covers. They look awesome, and Hawkman to get one. But besides the covers, Hawkman has been such a great, consistent book. You can really tell that Venditti is not only trying to build a story, but he's trying to build a character back into the public spotlight. And for me, this book makes me realize why Hawkman is always considered one of the most quintessential members of the Justice League and why he's such an icon. So if you guys aren't reading Hawkman, they just hit issue 5. I'm sure you can go back and manage to get earlier issues, but go check it out. It's a fantastic title.
I would add to that Justice League 5. I did read it. Hawkman #5. I won't spoil it other than to say that the Atom guest stars in it, and the art is truly fantastic. And the Atom, I mean, Brian Hitch is definitely on his A game, very much on his A game, and it's. I know it sounds weird. Longtime readers will appreciate what I'm about to say, but this is actually a Hawkman series that isn't confusing. And because that has not always been the case. Jeff Johns did a pretty good stellar run on it. But Hawkman has long been known as a character whose history could get a little bit confusing for new readers. But this is fairly straightforward. It's easy to understand. It's Hawkman going through different past incarnations of himself, and having different adventures at different places in space and time throughout the multiverse. It's easy to follow. It's fun. It's adventurous, and the art's fantastic. Having said that, my pick of the week, it was a fantastic week for comics. This is a really, really tough choice for me, but I'm going to have to go with, and I'll probably end up changing my mind. I haven't finished reading them all. I just sort of paged through them, but I'm just really enjoying. I'm Catwoman. I like Joelle Jones. She didn't draw the entire issue this month, but she's. This week, it sort of focuses on Selena Kyle meeting up with her sister Maggie, who, if for those of you who know, may not know, the Black Mask back in, I think that was over 10 years ago now, in pre-New 52 continuity, the Black Mask essentially traumatized Maggie, Catwoman's sister, quite seriously, and she's still traumatized from that. I didn't realize that Maggie was that they were following that continuity, but apparently Joelle Jones is, and it's interesting. It's interesting, and there's a new crime family that Selena Kyle's dealing with. It's explained why she chose the city she chose after leaving Batman at the altar. It's really good. Joelle Jones is building a good story here, and it's that crime rock kind of feel, and it's pretty good, and so I'd recommend it.
That's awesome. No, I haven't read it since, but
sorry, go ahead.
No, that's awesome. I haven't read it since issue 1, but I'm sure if I'm correct, the art in it's very stylistically similar to Joel Jones' art, is it not?
It is I didn't quite get all that you said, but the guest artist, and I can't remember the name right now. It's pretty good. Like, it has a lot of flashback sequences to Catwoman's past, so it's pretty good. Like I said, it's DC right now. I have to say, has generally better artists, I find, than Marvel overall. I'm enjoying some Marvel titles. I still think Marvel's doing pretty good, but I do think that DC has a slight edge on them in the art department.
No, I will say I do agree to that. One thing I will say is that arguably I think that I think not to go too far on a tangent. I think Marvel's stories that I've been reading so far have been a little bit more consistent than DC's lately, which is, DC was on top for the last couple of years by leaps and bounds, and now I'm starting to see a little bit of a balance. And that's coming from a guy who is majorly a DC fan. I read both, but I generally prefer DC and their characters. So that's maybe that'll be another topic of conversation in a couple months, just looking at the last couple of years of like where Marvel and DC have been standing.
One of the people that we talked about before this stream started, Dark Knight Nation, is you had mentioned Professor Bill at Comic Book University. I know I'm a fan of his. I know you are too. I always listen to his review of Marvel comics. I actually collect a good number of Marvel comics, and I share your sentiment that, I got to tell you, like, the Immortal Hulk right now is a fantastic comic book. The Avengers, Jason Aaron's done a really good job. I'm really enjoying Infinity Wars. I can't really complain. I'm enjoying Domino by Gail Simone. It's surprising to me. Daredevil, I'm enjoying Daredevil. Like I said, I hear what you're saying about their stories being pretty much on track, and yeah, and even with, I'm curious to know how Spider-Geddon's going to be. I'm curious to think how Spider-Geddon, the series, is going to be once the movie comes out. That was there was that 10-minute end credit Spider-Geddon tease, Edge of Spider-Verse tease at the end of the movie Venom, which was really good, with Miles Morales, Peter Parker, and Spider-Gwen was in it. That movie the animation looks fantastic. That looks really good. I think right now Marvel is definitely firing on all cylinders here. I have to disagree with some of our fellow YouTubers who seem to be, I think, ridiculously harsh with Marvel right now. I don't care what Marvel's politics is, as long as if they keep putting out quality like they've been putting out in 2007 and 2018. I think the future of comics, I think, is going to be fairly decent.
No, I mean, and on topic with that, for those of you listening to this live or listening to this recording, next week, the lovely Comic Boom, myself, and a guest, Comic Book University, who you'd mentioned before, are going to be going over Marvel Fresh Start and how they're about 6 months out of the initiative. And man, let me tell you, it's largely been great. Captain America, fitting with the hat you have on right now, is just straight up one of my favorite books coming out right now. It is a great story, and I've reviewed it a number of times. I think it's the out of all my that's not like I have a huge library of videos, but out of all my comics pull list videos, it's the only Marvel title that I've reviewed twice. Yeah. You got to think I'm only about 9 pull list episodes in, so that's pretty big for me. And again, like you said, Immortal Hulk, fantastic title, really cool new spin, and I could go on and on about some of these books and how good and how original these ideals feel. I will say this, ending it off kind of on topic with the convention thing. I got to meet Al Ewing this weekend. Really nice guy. Really, really nice, down-to-earth guy who is really trying to do something new and fresh with this character, while also respecting what came before it. And you really can't ask for much more than that. So if you're not reading Immortal Hulk, you have, A, it's amazing.
Yeah.
B,
and this latest issue of Immortal Hulk, wow, does it end on a twisted note, I tell you. It's really good, but it ends on a twisted note.
No, I mean, it's a spectacular title, covers by Alex Ross. Not to mention, not only is the quality of writing good, but the quality of the writer behind the book as a person is solid. So go check that out. But yeah, I mean that's
Okay,
all there is
well,
to it.
I will. I think we'll call it. We'll call it a night. I want to thank once again. I want to thank Dark Knight Nation for being my guest this time around. We always decide who's going to host, and I guess I got the privilege this week. So Dark Knight Nation, thank you. Dark Knight Nation, you can be. Why don't you tell us? You got your own YouTube channel, right? Dark Knight Nation, and
I do.
and you're on Twitter at Dark Knight Nat 25, right?
Yeah, Dark Knight NAT 25. I couldn't fit Nation in there by one letter, so I got part of it and put my favorite number in there. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter where I stay pretty active on it, promoting both my videos and some quality videos by gentlemen such as Comic Boom over here. But yeah, I have a YouTube channel. Link is in the description below. You can come check me out. We are on the race to a little 100 subscribers, so I'm really excited for that. There'll be a giveaway once we hit that little milestone. And on par for this whole Comic-Con conversation, I just dropped a video regarding part of Jeff Johns' Spotlight panel at New York this year. I have some exclusive footage. I give a little bit of a commentary, and it's regarding all of like the DCEU movie and television stuff that he's involved with. If we get 10 likes, we're going to drop the comic book portion of the Spotlight, which frankly I have more footage of, so that's coming. And then I have a Heroes in Crisis review coming out, and I just did, or last week I had put out a Batman Damned kind of motion comic summary and review, which is my highest performing video of all time by far. But without plugging myself, for those of you, I'm sure most of you are subscribed to Comic Boom, but if you're not, he's like less than 10 subs away from 300. And to be honest with you guys, out of all of the guys that I communicate with and associate myself with in this smaller YouTuber comic book space, this guy deserves the subs the most. So if you're not already, which you should be, make sure you're subscribing to Comic Boom, man. His stuff's great. He always has something great to say about what's going on in comic books and all the things related. So I appreciate you having me on the show, and I always appreciate just having a conversation with you every week, man. So thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you so much. And a shout out to your channel. I mean, again, and your Batman Damned video, that was one of the very high quality. That was very well put together. It's a joy to watch. So it's not surprising that you're in excess of 2,500 views on that. That's a work of art.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. You're very kind.
But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. And Dark Knight, I'll talk to you later. And Comic Boom and Dark Knight out.
Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching.